All right. Welcome. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the last Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District meeting of the year of 2019. Unfortunately, our chairman is unavoidably detained this morning with some family issues, and so I get the opportunity to chair this morning. So, with all that being said, we'll call the meeting to order and have Mr. John Stevens. Will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, sir?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. All right, Madam Clerk, can I get a roll call, please?
Of course. Vaughn Hartung, Chair, is absent. Bob Lucy, Vice Chair.
Here.
Marcia Burke-Bigler.
Here.
Kitty Jung.
Present.
Jeannie Herman.
Here.
Fire Chief Charles Moore.
Here.
Deputy District Attorney Nathan Edwards.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, Chief, we're on to item 3.
Item 3 is public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. District will also hear public comment during individual action items with comment limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments are to be made to the Board of Fire Commissioners as a whole.
Great, thank you, Chief. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments signed in?
We have nobody signed in.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, we are on to item 4, Chief, Commissioners and Fire Chiefs announcements.
Item 4, Commissioners, Fire Chiefs announcements, requests for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda. I do have one announcement, Mr. Vice Chair. We received an ISO review of the Gerlach Fire Department, and their rating has improved. So I will distribute that just as soon as I have a chance to digest it and kind of quantify what that means in terms of insurance rates for the Gerlach folks, but it's good news that it has improved.
Great, thank you. Any commissioners, anything this morning? All right, seeing none, we'll close that. We're on to item 5, moving quickly through the consent, sir.
Item 5 are consent items. Mr. Chairman, I need to mention that on the agenda, it mentions 11/17 draft meeting minutes. The date needs to be corrected to 11/19, although it's reflected correctly in the actual minutes. It's stated incorrectly on the agenda.
So, unfortunately, I think you guys need to pull that and bring it back at the next one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. All right, so what we'll do is we'll pull item 5A from the consent agenda. Is there anything else that any of the commissioners would like to have pulled or discussed on further notice within the consent agenda? Seeing none, no, I got a motion by Commissioner Burke-Bigler. Second, I'm looking for a second. Do I have a second from Commissioner Jung. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hold on. Motion carries unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, we did have a speaker on item A, but
Oh, I'm
since it was
sorry.
pulled.
Yeah, so since it was pulled.
Yeah, the motion reflects that item A was pulled, so we were approving item B.
But the public comment will have an opportunity to speak during general public comment in the end. All right. So Chief, we are on to item 6.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Item 6 is a recommendation to accept a monetary donation in the amount of $5,000 from ADT Security Systems in operational support to Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District Fire Volunteer Program, and to express appreciation for the thoughtful contribution and direct Finance Department to make appropriate budget adjustments.
All right.
We're very thankful to ADT. We intend to use the money for protective clothing for our volunteers.
Awesome. That's fantastic. All right, looking for a motion. Is there any public comment signed in on this, Madam Clerk?
No, sir.
All right, seeing no public comment. Looking for a motion. I have a motion. Second. Motion by Commissioner Burke-Bigler, second by Commissioner Herman. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Please submit your votes. Please affirm your votes on the board. Motion carries unanimously with Commissioner Hartung being absent. All right, item 7. This is the International Association. This is Local 2487. Report. Mr. Satterfield.
Good morning. Ian Satterfield for the record. I'm here to introduce Josh Cutts. He will be taking over as the new union president for 2487 as of January 1. But I wanted to say thank you to all of you for all your hard work, time, and collaboration with us. It's been a fun, hard 4 years, but I think we've accomplished a lot, and I appreciate all your guys' time and effort. And here's Josh Cutts.
Good morning. Josh Cutts for the record. I'll be your guys' representative for Local 2487 for the next 2 years. So excited to continue to work forward with you guys to make TM one of the best agencies in the state. Thank you.
Joe. Welcome to see. Any questions from the commissioners? No?
I would
Jim?
like to just say thank you so much, Mr. President Satterfield, and for all your hard work on and off the clock. I've spent many early mornings with you while you're getting ready to take your kids up to Sky Tavern, and thank you also, Mr. Sieben, for all your assistance in essentially bringing me up to speed and apt drinking water out of a fire hose, trying to understand fire services and an engine and a ladder truck. And no, that was a water truck. No, that was a tender, back and back. But now I know what all those mean. Before I would just smile pretty, right? So I really appreciate you for that and all that you've done with this brotherhood and sisterhood of your union, and I welcome you aboard. I know you have big shoes to fill, but I know that Mr. Satterfield will help you with all of his institutional memory and experience, and I'm here to make you successful. So
Thank you.
welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. All right. Chief, we're on to item 8.
Item 8 is a fire chief's report and informational briefing on operational matters and activities for the month of November and December 2019. And item 1 is target shooting update. I'd like to ask Mr. Don Kuhn, our fire prevention specialist, to update you on a meeting we had with BLM and regional stakeholders and members of the public about how we're going to move forward on target shooting and ancillary safety issues.
Good morning.
Welcome, Mr. Kuhn.
We've just started meetings. We had one late last month and one before, and we've got one scheduled for mid-January with all of the folks involved with shooting sports, the land control, fire agencies in our area. And I'm not sure if you have this document available. There you go. This document is basically showing areas here in northern Nevada that have had fires started by target shooters out on public land. And you can see a lot of them are really close into town. Some of them are in the outskirts. What we're attempting to do is come up with some, what we want to term micro ranges, smaller facilities located where a lot of the shooting is already taking place, but go in, do some development. BLM's offered up the land to allow us to put these micro ranges, and they would be unmanaged places where folks could go to target shoot, and that would be safe and fire resistant. We would go in and cut fire lines around them and prepare them such that in the summer months, when we have a lot of these shooting fire starts, they would have these facilities available when typically our own range out in the north is full of folks. We have, standing room only out there. So a lot of folks gravitate to public ground, and then we end up with wildfires. It's early on in the process. Just wanted to let you know that this was occurring. We have a couple of, forgive me for how rough this looks. I just found out I'd be standing here about 15 minutes ago. But we have identified some areas that we would like to see the potential for development going out the I-80 East corridor south. Let's see, move that up right about there. Down in southern Washoe Valley along where we've got some public ground. And then out in the north, you can see where we have the existing shooting range, but we have a lot of fires starting out in the Red Rock, Winnemucca Ranch Road area. A lot of good ground to actually develop some micro ranges far enough from residents that the noise issue wouldn't be a problem. Like I say, it's early on in the process, and so just wanted to bring you up to speed on what we're attempting to do. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Kuhn. Yes, Commissioner John.
Thank you, Mr.
Kuhn, C-O-O-N.
Coon. My maiden name is Kuhn.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. What I want to ask you, first of all, I love this idea of the micro ranges, because the number one complaint we get when we tell people, shame, 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 you shouldn't be shooting over here, go to the range, is there's not enough room there, like you said. That's where everybody goes. And the micro ranges also are good because they will patrol themselves, hopefully. Because we don't have the eyes on staff on, sheriff doesn't have it, nobody has that up here. But what I would like you, now that you're on board and doing your first presentation here, Mr. Kuhn, could you look into a way, I've been asking for this actually a couple summers now, and let's get a hold of this before this next summer, a way to have the ability to countywide declare no shooting period when we know it's a high fire day. And I know that that is a lot of jurisdictional rigmarole, but I would feel like Sparks, Reno, the airport, the lake, would want us to call a countywide no-shoot day because of the high incidents that a fire might occur. Just to give one more layer of protection, and most importantly, if somebody still goes out and shoots, to be able to use them sort of as a whipping person and an example to others. This is the giant fine and fee you get. This is what happens when you don't obey this, so that we have another dial that we can pull, or a lever, when we know it's a high fire danger. Now, I get it, and all of the shooters are gonna come and tell me, we would never do that. These are the clowns that go out and don't, but that's okay. More clowns get caught, more clowns talk to each other, and then more clowns start getting in line, right? The people that disobey the law no matter what. So, I know you're brand new to this, but would you please speak to our lobbyist as well, Mr. Chief Brown? He works for us as a paid lobbyist for the fire service, to see what other people have done in high fire danger zones, so that we had another piece, at least some teeth, to tell people today is not the day to shoot. Just like and what needs to go along with that, I don't want to get too far off the agenda, but what needs to go along with that too is telling construction companies, shut down today. You can't move anything out here in these frontier range areas where we know big fires start, and then we put our firefighters in danger, and most importantly, we put homes in danger. Not most importantly, obviously lives are worth more than homes, but the fear that we live in every year of fire here, and the air quality we get once we get a big fire. And we do a good job, I believe, TM does, because we push them completely away from structures. And actually, I've heard the chief say, and let's let some of this underbrush burn the heck out, since we've already got this on fire and we know it's safe, because we're not allowed to manage fire anymore either as a society. Nobody ever wants a fire, which is normally what happens in a forest, right? A healthy forest. So I would just like to start now looking towards what other levers can we pull. And if that's not a lever that you think is good as a fire prevention specialist, come back and tell us what is better. I'm just kind of going from experience of seeing these fires crop up every summer, from illegal target shooting or construction. Thank you,
I know
Mr.
that-
Chair.
Well, the BLM does have regulations that key off of our red flag warning days that is supposed to prevent shooting on the rangelands. Whether or not and how that's being enforced, I couldn't tell you. I know that in our Wildland Urban Interface Code, there is some specific language we could take a look at it for an enforcement standpoint that speaks to basically barring activities on the interface. And so we'll take a closer look at that. Any other questions?
Yeah, Commissioner Herman.
Thank you so much. When I asked for this to come forward, I thought, oh, it's going to take forever and all that, how things roll in the government. But I really thank you for getting, it started. And I like the fact that, you're going to be maintaining these by keeping fire breaks and all that sort of thing, and just in case somebody gets out there at the wrong time or whatever. But I'm very pleased with your report, and thank you so much. And if there's some way I can help, please let me know.
Will do, thank you.
Mr. Kim, and I want to, just one last comment I want to add in here. You talked about the micro ranges. What I'd like to see also from this is maybe a meeting with yourself, the chief, and the new county manager to discuss potential of where are the highest incidents of these target shooting fires that we're noticing, or how we can possibly relate that to those fires, and see where the county can get involved in potentially building some of these micro ranges, maybe unattended micro ranges, in conjunction with TM, and so that they're a monitored range that allowed for shooting for the open public, not going to be managed by a range master necessarily, but at least the land is available so that we know these people have truly an option to go somewhere. And there's plenty of county land, and through some potential opportunities with the federal government, we can also get some of that land. So I'd like to see if we can set something like that up, Chief, and have those discussions with Manager Brown and further that discussion. All right, seeing any other discussions? Thank you, Mr. Kuhn.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Kuhn, may I have the maps for the record, please, over here?
All right, Chief.
Item 2 is open burning update concerning private property pile burning. I'd like Jay Johnson to come up. We've developed an app on our website to apply for burning permits online, which is really going to streamline things. So lots of people took advantage of the green waste program, but we still have a lot of people where it's impractical to move your green waste, whether it's due to the size of your lot or the distance away from our collection points. So we are going to open up individual permissions for on-site citizens to burn piles beginning January 1st. And we're going to limit that to the first 7 days just so we can manage the smoke. It's going to be limited to a green burn code day and acceptable weather. But I want to commend Jay and his staff for developing this. It is really slick. So Jay, if you'd take it away and explain it.
Sure. Jay Johnson, Washoe County Technology Services, GIS. So in years past, Truckee Meadows has had an online form, and from the public's perception, this will look much like it has in years past. And you can see that form up on your screen. I'm going to ask, we've got Jason Bogal and Jason Bush in the back here. They helped develop what's behind the scenes here. So I'd ask Jason to go ahead and start typing in that first address. This is what the public uses to apply for a burn permit. In years past, the public would just fill this form in. There was no verification of anything or behind-the-scenes checking. As Jason types in an address here, this now goes out to the GIS database against the parcel information and only brings back legitimate addresses. You select one of those, and it also pops in the parcel number, or APN. The rest of this form you'll see is very much like it's been in years past. Essentially, the person asking for the permit has to agree to all of the conditions that Truckee Meadows Fire requires, and this is by making them go through and do all these check marks, it makes sure they've read everything, right? So they move down through, they do all their checks, they read everything, and essentially they electronically sign it at the bottom. And then as soon as they submit the form, it goes out, it does all those checks in the background we talked about, where it looks at, is it in Truckee Meadows Fire District, first of all, or is it in Sparks or Reno? Is it in Hydro Basin 87, which has special conditions for burning? And finally, what is the acreage of that parcel? Because that also drives whether the permit is approved or not. So if you'll scroll back up, this particular permit met all of the conditions, so it was approved. The user, the public applicant, gets this and they can print it out for their records and to show if there's a question. So if you want to go back, Jason, and let's go do the fail address now. So while he's doing that, I'd like to mention also that all of this information, in years past, the app would send an email to somebody at Truckee Meadows Fire, and then they would have to manually deal with the data from that point. Now, this writes the data into a database, so every time someone does a submittal, whether it's successful or not, we record all that information in a database that Truckee Meadows Fire staff will have access to. All right, so this is one, you can go ahead and submit this. This one, again, it goes back and it checks all of the conditions, comes back and says, for this particular location, it failed for a couple of reasons. First of all, the parcel was too small, and under half an acre. And secondly, it was in Hydro Basin 87, which requires 2 acres minimum. So we've got some fairly complex logic in the back checking to make sure that we can issue a permit, and we give the user either a permit they can print or a message of that it failed and why it failed. The last thing I'd like to show, Jason, if you'd flip over to the other tab, this is not something the public sees. This is Truckee Meadows fire staff. They now see, if you see all those white circles with a little flame in it, that's everywhere that someone has applied for a burn permit and either was approved, which are the regular flames, or was not approved when it has an X on top of it. So staff will have access to essentially an Excel sheet or other tabular list, as well as this way to see where permits are being applied for.
That's awesome.
So that's pretty much the core of what we've done, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Commissioner John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I love it. Bravo. This is amazing, Mr. Fire Chief. I hope you are putting this out with your great PIO who works for you, because this not only has, the interface that's immediate, it also has the built-in accountability, because you have to check all those and I wouldn't check a box I didn't read, right? Especially when it comes to fire. And I love that you can see it in the background. And you can see if Kitty Jung at 1057 University Terrace tried to get one through TM and then has a giant fire in her backyard, you know to send lights and sirens because you denied me automatically on the, right? Because I live right in the city. I think this is great from a fire management and predictability, right? When I'm texting you or calling you going, there's smoke in the sky, what's going on? People are calling me. That you can pinpoint that, not only of the permitted, but the unpermitted, which there's going to be those people too that just says the hell with it, and they're gonna have their big fire in the backyard. But you already know that it's coming because you have the background. I think this is incredible, and the more you make this so user-friendly, the more we will get positive response and compliance. We make it hard, people just say, try and catch me, right? And now we have them, even when they fail, we have them on the record that they did this and they knew they were doing it. I don't know how hard you want to come down on that, but it's serious when we don't know what fire is going. So thank you, IT. I will use the chief's word. This is slick. And I am proud of this, and I would love to see this just blasted across this community so that other agencies that don't have this ability feel shamed into creating their own app for all of these different user-permitted government exchanges. So bravo, thank you.
Any other commissioners? No. Mr. Johnson, I want to say the same things. I think this is phenomenal. In the day and age where we live, where everything is very technologically advanced and we try to do automatic vehicle locators, just seems like the right path forward to make sure that ease of access for any of our constituents to get online and quickly move through the process is amazing. One question I do have for you, Mr. Johnson, is that I know the website obviously is mobile ready and can be accessed through everybody's cell phone. However, with the app, is there a way that if they go through the burn permit and do it on their phone, then they get that burn permit, it's still just as functional as it is on a computer as it is on their phone? We've tested on both sides.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. That's fantastic. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 3 is upcoming capital purchases to include station and apparatus additions. I've mentioned to many of the board members that we're now looking at debt financing for a lot of our major capital purchases, and this spreadsheet is just really a current contemplation for what we're thinking. For Station 37, and by the way, the City of Reno did approve our boundary line adjustment, so we're full speed ahead on Station 37. But we'll pay cash to upgrade the residence, which will start immediately. The design of the truck bay and the offices is occurring now, and we're anticipating that we would debt finance that when the plans are ready, probably sometime late spring. Our fire truck upgrades, which is down the agenda, we're proposing to do some cash and to some debt financing. The board has not fully considered the issue of consolidating stations 30 and 32, but if it does, and we'll bring that back to you in January, if you do, that would be a cash purchase of the land, but a debt finance of the building. Administration, logistics, and fleet has been on our radar for quite a while. Not until a few years from now would we consider purchasing that. And then the North Valley Fire Stations, that ties into the consolidation of Station 30 and 32. So if that occurs, then we start making plans to make career stations at Silver Lake and at Lemon Valley. And the Silver Lake Station would be a contributed capital from the developer. Lemon Valley would likely be financed out of our budget. So just a quick briefing there. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Commissioner Jungsenden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fire Chief, can you, I don't know what our standard operating procedure is, but I know many times we are up here as your fire board and asking for changes in direction that you might not even love, but the board voted for. It might not have been your advice. Can we start putting a fiscal note on things once commissioners say, hey, I want to do this green program, which I do support. I think it's wonderful. It's not a criticism, but I think it would help you tell the story more of when this board sends you in a different direction. What is the fiscal note? What does that do to personnel? What does that do for future purchasing of what you consider critical needs? And this board has went maybe crazy, because boards do that, especially a board of people that don't know fire. So can we have a standard operating procedure? Because I know that we're not a real cash-rich fire service, and I know that we had to build up from really negative in terms of what we inherited. We had to do so many improvements. Our equipment wasn't where you would have said you would have liked to have had it maintained. It wasn't up to season and all the stuff. So can we start doing as an SOP that you just put a fiscal note when we go, yeah, we love this idea. And then you tell us, well, this is how much it costs. This is how many people I could hire. This is actually the 4-bay. I don't even know what that means, but I've heard you say it. This is the 4-bay that I would like to build. Because I think what happens, of course, in any elected body is the populism of the moment often takes precedence over the long-term strategy of where you'd like to see this fire service, so it will always maintain itself on its own, even in face of, which we just saw, another recent annexation. So if you could put a note, I don't want you to have to put hours and hours into it, but just a note like, this is how much I would forecast, rough on a napkin, so that we can kind of see where our resources are, what our liabilities are, and where do we really want to go. Because I know we had that wasn't an argument, the concern about Gerlach. Some different concerns, a concern about the consolidation or changing of the configuration in Washoe Valley because of staff and cash stress. So maybe you could look it up. There might be a best practice how to do it. But just a fiscal note that says, according to my expert advice, this is where I'd rather this money go, or put this one off. Because I think because it's not really a new fire service anymore. I think we've established ourselves here in the region, but I think sometimes you've been running to goals that shifted and you couldn't I'm sure your finance people are saying, where are we going to get the money for what these yahoos up here who write blank checks, it looks like. And it's just because we don't know, really. You're trying to keep us happy, keep the population happy, if you could just fiscal note things, I think we could have a better discussion of where we'd like to go as a fire service and region. And really, Mr. Fire Chief, looking at solidifying and maximizing the fact that we can stand alone, even in the face of what I think is should be illegal, but it's not, annexation up here and the loss of our resources. How are we looking for that so that you're not going out and buying a chipper? See what I'm saying? And I don't know if those were good, bad, or indifferent. I just know that I want us to be solid. I want this to be a legacy for all of us because we helped build this. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one thing that may be helpful for the board is our strategic plan, which is still in development, but I wanted to give the board a look of what this department will look like in 5 years, and we're working hard on that. So where stations will be located, how we're going to do fuels, how we're going to use the volunteers, all the A to Z is coming for you in if not January, in February. I'd like to ask the board to spend a couple of meetings on that strategic plan and verify some of those things that you're mentioning, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Commissioner John. Any other comments for Chief? Chief, I have a really quick question. I want to go over a couple things for the North Valley stations. Obviously, you pointed out the Silver Lake would be contributed by the station would be contributed by the developer. The I-80 corridor, the Apple, and is that is still being contributed by Apple? Is that correct?
That's correct.
And still looking to be stood up in the year 2023. Is that correct?
When we have the money to actually stand it up is not determined yet. We're actually doing a revenue study, an expense study. We've hired a local economist with the help of UNR to tell us how much growth we're going to see in the next 5 years and how much growth and equate that to dollars. And that's, again, part of our strategic plan so that we can show you, here's the money that we have available to do the improvements that the board would like, and ask the board to then prioritize those improvements. So I don't know, to answer your question directly, I don't know when we'll have the financial capacity to staff Apple, but it is something that we're thinking about at the staff.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. All right. Next, Chief.
Finally, item 4, future fuels projects and wildfire planning and the development of a fuels management crew to include grant and funding resources. In your next agenda item, you're going to consider a job spec for a wildfire division chief. But I want to mention that we are hot on the trail of grant money that's coming from NV Energy, from fire management assistance grants, and SNPLMA. I think only Chairman Hartung can actually tell you what that acronym means. But it is grant money to help develop fuels projects within county parks and public lands. And there's quite a bit of money there, actually millions of dollars, that we think we're going to qualify for. So with the development of the division chief, that person's job will be to go after that grant money, some of which has already been committed. And the FMAG money, if you have had an FMAG fire, and we had 2 last season, we get first dibs at that grant money. And I believe I heard Chief Kukla say it's about $1.8 million to be dispersed over the next 3 years or so. And I forgot to ask to put that the slide up, if you have it back there in IT, so that we can start doing fuels projects in a big way. So what we're contemplating is developing this coming season is 2, that's not it. That's the wrong one. It is just a single slide of Jasper Fire, if you can find that. I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. So 2 fuels crews, one in the north and one in the south, to be able to start doing fuels projects. So if we look at the Jasper Fire, the FBAG money we can use to help define and create fuels breaks in and around those FMAG areas. So if you look at this line, Jasper Fire threatened Spanish Springs to the right and threatened a whole lot of structures in Sun Valley to the south. So we can use that FMAG money to help strengthen those fire lines, by way of an example. So that is what the fuels crew would do. And over time, we'll continue to make that a more robust program, but I am contemplating that it be a significant initiative of next year's budget, and so that will be coming towards you to consider. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chief. All right. Commissioner Burkbaker.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So SIPLMA is the Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act, and hopefully we'll have a similar one up here. But I think it's important to point out to us that we've gotten quite a bit of money for public land protection in Northern Nevada from SIPLMA. One would hope that as we get, I think we call it TIPLMA, up here in Northern Nevada, as we begin working on that, and once that gets in place, about 5 years, excuse me, down the road, that we will get the same type of income from it to benefit projects that need to be handled. Sorry, and with that, I'll.
And Commissioner, one thing I'd added, Commissioner Burkbaker is exactly right. One of the intents of the Truckee Meadows Public Lands Management Act is to have money set aside to go towards conservation, which would be fuels management, that type of management and conservation processes throughout the region, so that we could self-fund a lot of those programs, which would be fantastic, and it would be very helpful in situations just like this. So I think, yes, Commissioner Brickbigler.
Thank you. Now that I have my voice back, I would finish what I was going to say. 75% of the money that, from the sale of those lands.
85 cents.
I'm sorry, 85% of the sale of the money from those lands actually goes to a fund that is controlled at the federal level, but is specifically designated to environmental protection issues in the state of Nevada. And so, some of that money might be used in central Nevada, but certainly some of it will be used up here. And as you know, I represent the Incline Village area, and so we have used a lot of that money at Lake Tahoe to protect from potential fire problems in Lake Tahoe, and also in environmental encroachment into the lake. And so I think these projects are really good, and it's great that the feds keep that money designated specifically to the state where the issues come from. So it's a good program, and I'm glad to hear that you're getting you're in line to get some of that money, because it's really a good program to work with.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Any comments? All right, seeing none. All right, Chief.
And Mr. Vice Chair, I'll just let items B and C stand unless there's specific questions.
Any questions for the chief or staff on items B or C? I just want to make one comment and point one other thing out, Chief. I'm looking at the October report for 2019. And once again, this goes back to a discussion we'll probably have in regards to the consolidation of stations 30 and 32. But if you go back to the numbers and you go back to page 1 on the October 2019 report, the call volume for October was 70% Northern Battalion and 30% from the Southern Battalion. And the Southern Battalion was represented by 6 stations, and the Northern Battalion was represented by 5. Once again, there is a serious discrepancy month after month that we're seeing the northern stations being worked tremendously harder for 5 assets versus 6 assets in the south, and there is that great disparity. So one thing I want to continue to point out, I know and every one of those 6 Southern Battalion stations is in my district, that is represented by my district and District 2, which is about 100,000 people, maybe 100,000 people, and 60% of that being unincorporated area. That is a lot of stations for a lot of area that is underutilized when we have a lot of stations, when we have a lot of area in the northern that's represented by a majority of 3 other commission districts that needs some attention. And I just want to continue to point that out. And I want to protect my citizens, but there is a major disparity. So, Commissioner John.
I agree, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for having the political courage to speak truth to that. And, largely that comes from, I'd like to put on the record while I'm working with these citizens about this, because I do think they should have a say in their future, is they've done a great job, at least as long as I've lived here, which is 20 and a half years, to make sure no growth went down there. So you don't get all the services if you won't have the growth. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, but that is, those things go together, and the same people that are upset about their precious fire station are the same people that are here for anything that we want to build down there. And I'm not saying that they're right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just a consequence of that isolationism, that insularism. You don't get all the services then. We have to prioritize our services where our dense population center is. And especially, I'm going to say, as a commissioner for majority of Sun Valley, we need you up there, because until we can twist REMS's arm around them and behind them to service them better than best effort, my TM is my Sun Valley's urgent care. So, and I know that's not a proper use of our resources either, Mr. Fire Chief, but it is the reality that we have, and you can't say no to that. You have to. You're bound by law, but most importantly, morality and compassion. So I am working with I want to tell you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lowe, who's a good friend I've known since before I ever was up here when I worked for the city. to explain those things and to make it fair and just and equitable, and I'm not trying to step on your toes.
No, no.
I want to help you with that, but I think it takes a lot of bravery on your part to say, listen, this isn't fair. And, and us other commissioners don't want to beat you over the head over that, but we see it's not fair. And that is not because you designed it that way. It's not because the constituents designed it that way. It's the natural consequence of density or lack thereof. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones. All right. Seeing no other further comments, is that it, Chief, you have for your chief report?
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll close. I don't see any public comment signed in on these items. So we will move on to item 9, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. In the interest of time, I'm going to paraphrase. Item 9 is a recommendation to approve and create a position of Division of Chief of Fuels Management and Wildfire and authorize staff to submit to NVPERS. In the aforementioned Chief's report, it kind of explained why we're doing this, but it is the first step in getting a fuels management program off to a running start.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Any comments or questions for the Chief on this item? All right, seeing none, looking for a motion. I have a motion by Commissioner Jones, second by Commissioner Burke-Bigler. All those in favor, signal.
Public comment.
We do have public comment signed in, Madam Clerk? I see no public comment on my screen. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Please affirm your votes. All right, Chief, we're on to item 10.
Item 10 is a recommendation to accept the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District's audited financial statements for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2019. I'll ask Cindy Vance, our fiscal officer, to come up and give you a brief presentation. And the audit is in your packets, bound and also within your tab.
And Mr. Chairman, I do have an updated staff report that I will distribute to the board and place on record.
Great, thank you, Madam Clerk.
Okay.
Mrs. Vance, welcome.
Thank you. For the record, Cindy Vance, Chief Fiscal Officer, Truckee Meadows Fire. I don't see our auditor here, but it was a clean audit. We ended the year actually with our revenues higher than our expenses in our general fund. So we did do some fiscal, conservative when we were still open for negotiations. And we did also not transfer any money to our capital projects fund or our general fund. The updated staff report that you see is because for some reason there was about 4 sentences in the middle of the staff report that got deleted, and it had run the emergency fund into the capital projects fund. I can go through our staff report a little bit on each fund, or I can just answer questions. I think so.
Commissioners, are there any comments, questions for staff in regards to the audit? Commissioner Burke-Bigler, seeing none, all right. Thank you, Ms. Vance. We don't think we have any questions. So looking for a motion to accept the audit.
Move approval of the audit for the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District.
I have a motion by Commissioner Burke-Bigler. Do I have a second? Second by Commissioner Jung. Please, Madam Clerk, is there any public comment? I don't have any signed in on my. All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Please affirm your votes. All right, Chief, we're on to item 11.
Item 11 is a recommendation to approve a single-tenant lease agreement between Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District and CKMR2 for the purposes of leasing office and warehouse facility located at 3663 Barron Way. We've done a financial analysis, and the amount that we spend on our admin here in the county, our Gregg Street lease, and also the amounts that we spend for the Regional Public Safety Center are really only about $47,000 difference than what we would spend for this building, and we would have nearly four times the amount of space to be able to function. Unfortunately, we're just simply out of space upstairs. We love being here, but we don't have any really conference room, and it's just really hard to get business done and as we grow as a district. So the lease has been negotiated down to 79 cents per square foot blended. And we do have the option to purchase this within the first 3 years at $185 a square foot, which I think is an excellent deal if the board, staff recommends to the board in subsequent years to do that. So we actually did some calculations on the debt for that building. If we were to buy it, it would only be about $100,000 more than we would spend on the rent. So it would seem like the logical conclusion that we rent for a couple of years and then we look to purchasing the building. It has a lot of possibilities for us and to include maybe even a secondary emergency operations center. We have lots of space there, so many possibilities for the district. So I would ask the clerk to hand out the actual lease, and I'm sorry, there was negotiations were down to you know how those things go, but we did negotiate the lease, and we want you to have that in the record. And staff recommends that you move to approve the lease.
Chief, first of all, I want to say congratulations. I know you and Deputy Chief Kuklis and Ms. Vance did a lot of work to get these numbers and work on this lease. I think that when you look at the cost savings and the consolidation of having all of the operations and administration under one roof, it makes a lot of sense for unification and cohesiveness of the district. I also want to think that, you know, for when you talk about negotiating a purchase price to the tune of what was $185 a square foot, I mean, that the replacement cost for a building of that nature is not even close. So I think that that's a phenomenal idea, and it's really, that is a credit to your ability to be very savvy financially to keep every dollar that we can fiscally working for us and not against us. So I think this is a smart move, and I want to commend you and staff for that. Are there any other comments from the staff? Commissioner Burke-Bickler.
Thank you. Yes, actually, thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually was going to say essentially the same thing, and then I do have one question. Will this move, which of course I think moving into this building and the financial aspects of this building are wonderful for you guys. I hate seeing you leave us, but that's okay. We'll just come over and visit you. But will it result in a need for you to hire any new admin staff or for management of the new building?
No.
Okay, good.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve.
One second, Commissioner John.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Fire Chief, when will you be out of this building here? When do you anticipate?
Well, the move-in's going to take a little bit of time, I think 2 months. We have to put in a phone system, IT, and do the actual physical move. So I would say, guessing we'd be operating in February.
Nice. Wow, that's fast. Okay, good. Well, I support this largely from the last time we talked about this, because you need your own campus, your own center, your own place, especially you're doing this big lift with critical care after an incident for mental health and post-traumatic stress. I never saw this as a functional way that you ran, being on the second floor of the assessor's office. It just felt a little hinky to me. So I fully endorse this and buy this sooner rather than later while we're looking at this, if they're that amiable to a good deal, because you know what's happening right now with real estate. But that may change too, right? I'd be a billionaire if I could tell you what day it was going to change. So I fully endorse that you have your own campus, and I think you should look forward to creating your own, a secondary regional operations center, because one of the largest feedbacks we got for critical incidences that are huge is knocking out what happens if that center is knocked out as your EOC. You have to have so much duplication and redundancy because we rely so much on electronics and technology, et cetera. So I think we actually could make that some sort of this is me always trying to commodify everything. We could actually maybe make the region pay into that too as their secondary. Eventually, once you get there, I know you have your arms to just get moved and settled, but maybe think of that towards the future of a secondary regional operations center. We'd be happy as the premier fire service in all of Washoe County to be the secondary for that. Thank you. And that's a form of a motion. I approve it.
Okay, so I've got a motion and a second. Further discussion really quickly I want to add
Sure,
to.
sorry.
Commissioner, Chief, I'm looking at the lease. It says on or before March 1st, 2020. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so now, can we take possession of the property before the March 1st, or no?
We can.
We can.
Yes, and
Immediately as the lease is signed, we will be able to take possession, but our rent will not commence until March 1st.
No, our rent will commence just as soon as we take possession of it. The landlord is finishing up some tenant improvements, and soon as those are done, we'll move in, but they should only be another 2 weeks. So just as soon as we get the keys, then our rent would be due.
And then that was my other question, the tenant improvements on the TIs, there will be no additional cost of the TIs for anything that we need to make it fully operational for us?
Correct, and we actually negotiated in a few things that we needed at no additional cost.
That's perfect. You know, and this goes back to my brief comment on the chief's report as well, is that now we're going to have as Commissioner Jung pointed out, a regional headquarters for Truckee Meadows in the south. It's basically another station, a very, very large station in the south. It may not be an active fire station, but it will have equipment and it will have staff. It'll have the ability to respond. Once again, we talk about headquarters and that we could run potential calls from headquarters if need be. Another reason that we should start moving some assets to the north where assets are necessary. All right, I have a motion from Commissioner Jung, second by Commissioner Burke-Bickler. Seeing no further comment or public comment signed in.
There's nobody signed in.
Mr. Chair, before you call the motion, just for the record,
Yes.
the copy of the lease that was just distributed to the board is available up here with the clerks, if there's anybody in the audience wishing to review it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. All right, seeing no public comment, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Item 12 is a recommendation to authorize the fire chief or his designated contract with a vendor for the purpose of refurbishing 3 Type 3 fire engines in an amount not to exceed $600,000 through adopted purchasing provisions. Upon identification of an acceptable vendor and sales price, authorize the fire chief to execute a service agreement on behalf of the district for refurbishment of the apparatus. If approved, authorize the chair to execute a resolution augmenting the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District Capital Fund outlay account from the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District Capital Fund, beginning fund balance in the amount not to exceed $600,000.
All right. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Commissioner Burke-Bickler.
I have no question at all. I just want to point out that this is such a great idea. Governments tend to buy things and not refurbish them or keep them up in good shape, and I'm happy to see that Chief Moore is really focusing on the fact that we need to keep our equipment in very good working order to benefit not just our constituents, but also to protect our firefighters as they're out in the field. So I'm very supportive of this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burke-Bickler. Any other comments? All right, at this time, do we have any public comment signed in?
No, sir.
I see no public comment. I'm looking for a motion. I have a motion.
Second.
Do I have a motion from Commissioner Burke, second from Commissioner Herman. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Please affirm your votes on the screen. All right. We are on to item 13A. This is a public hearing, so we will open the public hearing. Chief, take us into public 13A, please.
So there are, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, there's a series of steps that the district needs to take in order to issue debt for purchase of new fire equipment that will be considered down the agenda and also in subsequent meetings. This is the first step for you to initiate. And staff recommends that you open the public hearing, take any public comment, and then close the public hearing. Don't believe that there is any action that the board needs to take, but I'll defer to legal.
So that's correct. 13A and 13B are really, they're related, and they're meant to provide information on one overall item, but 13A is the public hearing portion of it, where you take the comment.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. All right, Madam Clerk, is there any public comment signed in that since the public hearing is now open?
There's nobody signed in.
All right, seeing no public and nobody wishing to speak, if there is anybody wishing to speak on this item, please. All right, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board. All right, so with that, Chief, we will at the same time, open 13B. Is that correct, Mr. Edwards? Can we do that at this time?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, so we'll open 13B to recommend and adopt the resolution authorizing the issuance of the medium-term obligations in the maximum principal amount of $4,415,000 under NRS 350.087 to 350.095. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'll introduce our financial consultant and bond counsel, as well as Cindy Vance will support. And I will mention, if you don't mind, John, that the board needs to vote as a supermajority on this particular resolution. Otherwise, we can't move forward under this, so just as an item. So, John, thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Welcome.
I was looking for a red light. Apologies. John Peterson with J&A Consulting Group. Good morning. And really would want to echo the words of Chief Moore. This is the first step in issuing a medium-term bond for the purchase of firefighting equipment. And as Chief Moore explained during the previous public hearing section, assuming approval of this resolution today, there is a process that is required under statute and that we would follow. That requires us to then submit information for approval from the State Department of Taxation. And once we receive their approval, to then bring back a final bond resolution to the board for approval at that time. In the interim, as that approval from Department of Taxation is out, we would also send out a request for financing proposals and receive those proposals back with the idea that at the February meeting of the board, we would present that final resolution for your approval. At that point, we would have interest rates and know the actual debt service cost. In the materials, it explains that we are currently evaluating either a 7-year or a 10-year debt service payment. And I will say that that is appropriate for the equipment that we're purchasing, since the equipment has a useful life of about 15 years. That decision in terms of the amortization will be made subsequent to this meeting. Certainly, we can bring back an update at another board meeting to let the board know what we are planning to do. But the estimated debt service payments for either the 7-year or the 10-year repayment schedule are between $510,000 and $700,000 a year. I will mention that because of the type of debt that we're issuing this medium term, the maximum repayment schedule that we're allowed to have is 10 years. So there's no chance of us going any longer on the repayment than 10 years. I will stop there and see if there are any questions from members of the board.
All right, do I have any questions from any of the commissioners in regards to this item? This is, once, as we pointed out from the bond council, this is the first step of many that a final resolution will come back to the board. I do not have anybody signed in on my screen at this time, so with that, I want to thank you for your brief presentation, and we obviously will look at for the further resolution down the road in the coming months to clarify and complete the process. So, do we have any? Oh, okay.
And I'll be really quick. For the record, Ryan Henry from Sherman and Howard Bond Counsel. I just wanted to reiterate what the chief said. Under 350.087, to move forward with passage of this resolution today, it requires a 2/3 vote of the entire board. And so to move forward, it would require four votes in favor.
Correct.
Thanks.
Thank you. We appreciate that. All right. This time, we're looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Burke-Bigler.
I would move to adopt a resolution authorizing the issuance of medium-term obligations in the maximum principal amount of $4,415,000.
I have a motion by Commissioner Burke-Bigler.
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Herman. All those in favor? Do we have any more public comment?
We do not have public comment.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Seeing no, we have no further public comment. All those in favor, I have a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Please affirm your vote. All right, and that passes unanimously. That is more with your supermajority. We are past that. Thank you very much. All right, Chief, we will close the public hearing, and we are on to item 14, which is our final commissioners and fire chiefs announcements. Chief, do you have anything?
I just want to mention for the board's benefit and members of the public that we'll be bringing back the issue of consolidating Station 30 and 32 at the January meeting. And the board may want to consider starting the meeting at 32, anticipating that there may be significant public comment. I don't know, but I think that might be helpful to do that. And staff will, of course, bring back all the information that the board's requested, further analysis and a final recommendation.
Great. Thanks, Chief. Commissioners, any discussions on that? All right, seeing none, we'll close that. And then we are on to item 15, our final public comment. Chief.
Public comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. The district will also hear public comment during individual action items with comment limited to 3 minutes per person.
All right,
Comments are
Madam.
to be made to the Board of Fire Commissioners as a whole.
Thank you, Chief. Madam Clerk, will you call public comment, please?
Certainly. First up, we have Mr. Cliff Lowe, followed by Ms. Tammy Holtstill.
Welcome, Mr. Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I was going to offer public comment on the consent agenda for the minutes from the last meeting. When those minutes come back, or before they come back, I hope, and I plan to work with the clerk's office to make a correction. I don't think it'll come as a surprise to you when I read this to you. This is not what I said in public comment at the meeting. It said he, referring to me, believed the TMFPD needed to reduce staff in Washoe Valley to cover Sun Valley, and this change would take care of the staffing issues without reducing the amount of stations in Washoe Valley. That is incorrect. I've reviewed the tape. So I hope to get that corrected, and I hope the minutes won't get approved until that has been corrected. Also wanted to comment that there may be a psychic connection between Commissioner Lucy and myself, because I was sitting in the back of the room and commented to Mr. Daly about the agenda item for the administrative location, the new location for Truckee Meadows Fire. And I'd commented to him, before Commissioner said anything, I commented to him, I said, I think perhaps they should have placed this unit out in the North Valleys. Not to second guess the chief, I'm sure he's done a great job, but then there would be an additional presence in the North Valleys. And no sooner had I commented to Mr. Daly than Commissioner Lucy commented that this is adding additional resources in the South. So, obviously it leaves me wondering if that's the result, then might it have, if that's another nail in the coffin that seems to be getting built relative to the two stations in Washoe Valley, might not have been appropriate for the board to have provided direction to the chief to focus his attention on the North Valleys for this? Because you're piling up more resources in the South and making more of a case for consolidating those two stations. Obviously, it's a done deal. It's been approved, and I trust it'll be a great thing for Truckee Meadows. But still, it seems like if that's the way you're going to look at it, then perhaps it should have gone north. The other comment I wanted to make was to repeat what I said at the last meeting, and that is that it was stated in the deployment plan, the purpose for consolidating the two stations was to free up 2 people to put a rescue unit in Sun Valley. At the second public meeting that was held about the consolidation, a commitment was made by for REMSA, not by REMSA, REMSA was represented, to put an ambulance at this new proposed station at the north end of Washoe Valley. Now, the reason to put the 2 people freed up is to cover medical calls in Sun Valley. Doesn't it make a whole lot more sense for REMSA to take this ambulance and just put it up in the North Valleys and let us keep our 2 stations? That solves your problem.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe.
Ms. Tammy Holtstill.
Welcome, Ms. Holtstill.
Good morning, Tammy Holtstill, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee for the record. There's a few things that I'd like to address. One being a lot of what the gentleman is talking about, I definitely agree with. Uses are sometimes questionable. A good example is Peavine. There is now a whole bunch of squatters up on Peavine, and of course, they're homeless or whatever you want to call them, but without facilities to use, they're digging holes in the ground, and they're peeing and they're pooping, and then that all runs downhill. And guess where it contaminates? Swan Lake. We already have an issue with Swan Lake. We don't need to have more issues because of development being built, which you're going to be talking about in the next meeting, that staffing for the North Valleys isn't there, number one. Number two, where the access is going to be and how to get in and out of that facility or that development is going to be a hindrance to your public safety. And it's right there on the border, and you don't have any type of mutual agreement with the city of Reno. And why? The common sense hasn't been used all the way yet. And it's time to start using it right. There's a lot of things you guys are starting to do right, but there's a lot of things you are doing wrong. And robbing Peter to pay Paul isn't the way to do it either. We need to have things fixed. We need better services in the North Valleys. We need Swan Lake fixed. It can't stay the way it's at. And I'll talk about that more in the next meeting. But when it comes to services, the development that is coming up, I'm sorry, but your staff should have said no, and you should be holding to no. Safety, public safety is your responsibility, 100%, all the way around, whether it's fire, police, pollution, that is your responsibility, and you need to be responsible. You need to take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holtstill.
There's nobody else signed in.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Seeing no further public comment, we'll close public comment, and we are adjourned. Thank you. What we'll do is we will take a short, brief recess. We will be back and start the next meeting at 10:15.